social compliance and conformity are extraordinarily powerful forces for the person who wants to manipulate a person or people. If they can work on a group of people to convince that group, it may be a group of co-workers who work at the same company, it may be a religious group, it may be a social club, it may be a group of enthusiasts about a particular subject or interest, it could be a religious group, it could be a small local community, but generally groups that are tied together with some sort of social bounds. If the manipulator can feed into that group and manipulate the majority of the group into their world models being changed to perceive things or a person in a particular way, then the people in the group who don't want to fit in, there will be enormous pressure of social compliance. So for instance, if a member of the group says, I think you're all wrong, I don't know why you can't see this, the social pressure on that person to comply with the group, to be wanted and liked by individuals and by the group, and to feel part of that group and belonging is enormous. And so there's a tendency to get sucked in to say, well, maybe I'm wrong because they all do seem to think the same way, so maybe I'm the odd one out. Again, it's what I call the flywheel effect. This is why social media is extraordinarily powerful for manipulators, because that social grouping, that flywheel effect, is really awesomely powerful, and it happens over time, and members of the group will try to force compliance of other members of the group to say, you know, you're causing problems by telling everybody we're wrong. Look, we all agree on this and you don't, so why don't you come and comply? And that desire to be wanted, that desire to be liked by the group, that desire to retain membership, that sense of belonging, these are all awesomely powerful emotional triggers. So again, it's back to emotional triggering. And often what members of the group will do is create links to those emotions and say, well, if you don't agree with us, how can we welcome you as a member of the group? You're not being fair to us. So again, the group flywheel effect will help the manipulator's cause, because they will seek to force compliance or to leverage compliance on the person who doesn't want to agree. The other really, really important aspect of social media is that the information you see on social media is filtered according to social groups. So in a world where we need to be exposed to unfiltered information, social media tends to filter it in groups. Groups tend to, not always, but tend to be people who tend to hold similar beliefs. And that's why it's very, very easy to influence these groups by manipulation and propaganda. And that's why they tend to have that flywheel effect of self-reinforcing, because the information that Facebook or Instagram or whatever allow into the group is filtered by the group's likes and beliefs. So particularly Facebook is a propagandist dream, because what we tend to see is stuff that agrees with what we believe in. And what the objective person needs is to see a whole range of things, so that they don't get further programming of this world model that distorts perception. And this is why social media is such a dangerous environment, because the way it's set up, it was set up with this knowledge, and it was set up because it could sell advertising to closely defined and targeted groups. And it's an advertiser's dream. You can very tightly demographically target the group you want to sell to. Something that television has never really been able to do, and general web advertising has never really been able to do. The best they could do was, if you show it between 3 and 4 o'clock, you may get mostly female with children, 18 to 60, whatever. This way, they can, the information that Facebook et al. Give to the advertisers is really, really tightly focused. And so they can get maximum bang for their buck, and they know that if they can influence one or two members of the group, they can influence all of the group, because the group share this commonality. And what they call the viral effect will tend, what I call the flywheel effect, will tend to perpetuate within that group. So don't for a moment believe things like Facebook are just sweet ways to keep in touch with your friends. It isn't that way at all. It's very well known, the viral effect, the flywheel effect, social conformity and all of that sort of thing is a huge part of their business model, and that's why it makes it an extraordinarily dangerous vehicle for manipulating people. So the scariest thing I can say that I've ever heard is people saying, I get my news from Facebook. Talk about confirmation bias. It's a confirmation bias machine, and this is why it's so dangerous. What challenges modification of this world, our world model, is by being presented with an unfiltered array of things. Now, we should never believe what we read. We should never go on what most people believe. We should always have as much experience and evidence as we can have. So it may not set us straight, but it may say, hang on a minute, if I get unfiltered feed of information, maybe there is cause for suspicion in what I'm led to believe, because there seems to be a weight of evidence on both sides. So at least I can withhold believing in this stuff, or maybe suspect what I tend to believe, and then go and do some real hard research and discover, which does not mean checking on Google or Facebook. It means going to really valid sources with proper hardcore researchers and searching that out. Now, because we tend to want to use trust and belief, we tend to want to jump to a conclusion about everything rather than hold the line and say, until I can really research it, I'm not going to have an opinion. And so it's this tendency to need to jump to a conclusion, which we talked about earlier, and then modify it, that is the problem. Objective people won't do that. Objective people will assume nothing. But you can be made to need to assume things if you are triggered and manipulated in the ways we've talked about. But make no mistake, social media will change the world, and it is extraordinarily dangerous because of the way these tools can be used so readily within it.